Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite games. It's Terraforming Mars. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to increase your victory point totals when you play this game. A very simple tip is that when you're doing the setup phase of the game, look at all of the cards that you have. So first and foremost, you're going to be given 2 different corporation cards, and then you're also going to be given 10 project cards. What I see a lot of players do, they kind of almost randomly choose one of the corporation cards, and then they cobble together a hand of cards, but they're really not looking at the overall mix of cards. So first and foremost, look at both of your corporation cards in conjunction with all of your project cards, and select a corporation based upon your opening hand, not the other way around. The Econoline Corporation was one of the 2 corporations I drew in my opening setup. In addition, I had 3 plant-based cards that also appeared in the 10 projects that I drew at the beginning of the game. What you really want to do is look at everything. So I looked at the corporation, I also looked at the project cards in my opening hand, and this is kind of what I decided to select. So I picked my corporation based upon 3 of the project cards that I found. All 3 of these are very strong plant-based cards. In conjunction with Econoline, you're really going to have an excellent and very, very easy way to bring out greenery tiles, which are going to give you victory points. So once again, look at the projects, look at your corporations, and build your opening strategy based upon both. Another quick tip on the setup is specifically looking at your project cards and knowing when enough is enough. A lot of players want to hold on to these project cards. A lot of these project cards are going to be minimally useful. It's going to take a long time for you to play them. They either have some sort of prerequisite or some sort of complex strategy that's surrounding the card. If it looks too complicated or if it looks like it's too restrictive to play, get rid of it early on. Remember that you're going to have to pay resources to keep every card, every initial project card in your hand. If they're not useful, get rid of them. As an example, I would keep maybe 1, 2, or 3 project cards that you know are going to be useful to you and your strategy throughout the game. The rest of them, get rid of them, purge them out, and don't waste those resources. Every resource you waste on a card that you're not going to play makes it that much harder to get your strategy and your engine moving for your civilization and your build. Another great opening strategy is to go big. There are a lot of cards in Terraforming Mars that cost quite a bit, but give you a massive jump in resources. These cards are played best at the very beginning of the game. Here's 3 examples of cards on the table that you can play in the initial generation, so the initial turn that you're going to play in Terraforming Mars. These will jumpstart your economy. In one case, we're adding 2 titanium production. In the other case, we're going to add 7 heat production, and then finally we're going to do money production on this card as well. You start the game with a decent amount of resources, so if you only have maybe 1 or 2 cards in your hand, you're going to be able to play these massive cards on the first turn, and it's going to jumpstart your economy in the game. New players to Terraforming Mars, I usually go over a very simple strategy with them, and that strategy is to build greenery tiles in conjunction with a few cities. This is the best way for you to build victory points both during the game by increasing your terraform rating, specifically by playing down the greenery tokens. Note that the greenery tokens produce oxygen. Oxygen then in turn increases your terraform rating if you increase it. So you kind of get 2 different points when you play a greenery tile. First, while you're playing the game, and then at the end of the game, when you're scoring points, each greenery tile that you placed onto the board will give you additional victory points. The next suggestion is that once there are a decent number of greenery tiles that start appearing on the board, is to supplement with cities. Cities give you 2 different bonuses. First, it will increase your money production, your money output every turn once you place that city down. It increases it by 1. And secondarily, at the end of the game, when you're scoring points, each greenery tile that's adjacent to one of your cities gains a victory point. So first and foremost, start putting out greenery tiles, then supplement your point income by placing down cities. This is the easiest way. It's not very flashy. It's very simple, very easy to do to increase your overall victory point total when you're playing this game. I almost suggest when a new player comes to this game, that's kind of the strategy that they focus on. They don't try to get too fancy. They just build greenery tiles and cities and use project cards that have you bring out either of those. The next point that I want to make is that the milestone option in the game is a very cheap and cost-effective way to gain a lot of victory points at the end of the game. The milestones are pretty much the same. You get to pick 3 milestones for whatever game that you're playing, and then whichever player purchases the milestone, you just simply put the corresponding color marker on, and then you mark whichever milestone that they're purchasing. But for only 8 credits, essentially $8 in the game, you can earn 5 victory points. Now, the milestones are competitive, so always be on the lookout. At the start of every one of your turns, before you do any of your actions, just glance over at the milestones and make sure that you're getting those milestones before your opponents. Oftentimes, people get kind of crazy. They start throwing down greenery tiles. They start throwing down a lot of the cities, and they're not really paying attention to the milestones. It's really easy for a player to sneak in and grab these milestones, and it gives you 5 victory points on the back end. You will seldom see a winner of this game that doesn't have at least 1 milestone and possibly 1 award. If you get 1 milestone and 1 award, you're looking at 10 extra victory points at the end of the game, and that's very, very big. That's very huge. Always pay attention to the milestones. Awards, in my opinion, are not as great as the milestones. Awards can fluctuate over the course of the game, and there's diminishing returns when you look at the cost. The milestones all cost 8 credits to bring out. The first award is 8, then it goes to 14, then it goes to 20. So there are some diminishing returns on spending on awards. The other thing that makes awards a little bit more difficult is that you look at who has the most of something at the end of the game. So you could be in the beginning of the game, be the banker, and you have a lot of money output. And by the end of the game, you've been overtaken and you don't actually get this award at all. So I'm going to recommend that go for milestones first. Then secondarily, and this is going to be sort of mid-game to late game, be aware of the awards that are on the table. And my kind of recommendation is, don't really buy the award unless you're 100% certain that you're going to get at least 5 or 2 of those points from that award. Otherwise, it's just not worth the resource investment that you're going to have to put into it. Especially the third award that costs 20 credits. That's a lot of credits. You can be using those credits to do something else. Tile placement in Terraforming Mars is also competitive. At the beginning of the game, the board is open, and you can get a lot of resources, such things as free cards like this Viking site. As a good opening first generation move, I always like to grab one of the ocean tiles and place it down, one of the aquifer tiles. For only 18 credits, I can get 1 terraform rating, and I can get 2 free project cards. This is a great opening generation turn, but once that tile location is taken, it's gone and it's done. So be aware that when you're placing tiles on the map, it's competitive. So if you don't get those benefits, somebody else will. So be always really cognizant of that. Here's a quick tip on city placements. Try not to place cities next to potential water tiles or ocean tiles. What you want to do is place it more out in the open. The more surrounding hexes that you have to place greenery tiles, the more points you can potentially score from that city. I see a lot of players, they'll kind of back them up to these ocean tiles, and it kind of limits, like in this case, the most greenery tiles you could place around this would be 4. And some of these other cases, in this location right here, the most greenery tiles that you could place around it is 3. So I see a lot of players do this over and over again, and it really limits your options for scoring. Here's another tip on city placements, and I see players do this all the time. And I'm not exactly sure why they do this, but when they're placing a city, they tend to try to place it next to a greenery tile that they own. And that's not necessarily the best place to put it. So as an example, let's say the black player owns this greenery tile right here, and they want to place a city onto the table. Oftentimes I see players stick their city literally right next to their greenery tile. The city can be placed anywhere. So if I look kind of at the map overall, there are some better places to put it. Like if I put the city right here, at the end of the game, I'm going to score 2 victory points. And if I place it here, I'm going to score 3 victory points. So don't get caught in the trap that you have to place your cities next to a greenery tile that you own. Put it in the place that scores the most points. And another thing too is be on the lookout as people start putting those greenery tiles down. There's a lot of times where you can get 2 points or even 3 points, like the example I just showed you, by just simply watching the game and being the first player to place that city down. This being a competitive game, another thing to be on the lookout for, and I also see a lot of players, they don't even pay attention to this, but let's look at the temperature tracker really quick as a good example. Note that there are some free resources that you get if you are the player to get that, essentially that temperature upgrade. So in this case, our heat production would go up. And in this case up here, we get to place a free ocean tile. This almost never happens. I think I've only seen that one time in the game, but irregardless, it's still on this tracker. So when you're going through your action phase, before you start just throwing stuff down on the table, always look at milestones, look at awards, look at all of the places you could put a city down to score points. And then finally, always look at these additional perks and bonuses you could get if you were to, let's say, increase the temperature by 2 degrees. Remember that a lot of this game is about observation, and it's about just taking the time to look at the board before you act. If you just take 5 seconds to look at the board before you start an action, you will increase your victory point total dramatically over the course of the game. You'll see things and you'll be able to play these things down. A lot of times when these games kind of drag on for a while, people get a little bit distracted. They're looking all over the place. They're talking to each other, things of that nature. If you just take 5 seconds to calm yourself down, take a look at the board, you can get a lot of free points. It's really easy to do. And all you have to do is just be observant. It's pretty easy. The next tip I want to teach you about is what I call resource overkill. And this is something that I see in almost every single game. At least 1, if not 2 or 3 of the players is actually doing this. And what they do is they get kind of excited and a little bit overzealous when they're producing resources. In this case, we have a player with 7 heat production. And when I look at the temperature tracker, it's getting close to the end of that sort of temperature track. And what I see people do over and over again, they'll start playing down cards to increase their heat even further. So what I'm going to try to get you to understand is know when to stop. When you have a resource and you have so much of it, and it's kind of just pointless to have any more, just know when to stop. I see a lot of players, they kind of get into a groove. They're like, yeah, heat is working for me. This is a great thing. And they just keep adding more and more and more. You know, in some cases, I've seen people with heat productions of 15 or more, which is a little bit crazy. It's a little bit excessive in the game. But once you hit the point where you can't spend it anymore, it's basically pointless. So 2 of the resources I want you to seriously consider sort of holding back on is both power and heat. Heat's probably the one you don't want a ton of. Every single player is going to be generating heat over the course of the game, and so it's going to be raising the temperature really quickly. Power is another one that I see people, they build up a lot of power and then they just don't spend it on anything, and then it turns into excess heat. Probably the most useful is plants, because it allows you to bring out greenery tokens, those greenery tiles onto the board. I also like titanium and steel. These are good sort of production things, but you don't need an excessive amount of them. Just having a couple points, a couple resources in each one really goes a long way. Money, in my opinion, works pretty well. It allows you to almost purchase anything. It's probably the most universal. So just really be kind of wary when it comes to power and heat. Don't go overboard on those. Plants, I mean, honestly, if you have 8 or more plants every turn, that's fantastic. You can put down a greenery tile every turn, basically for free. The titanium and the steel, be a little bit more conservative on that. You don't need a ton of it. It's really great for decreasing the cost of some buildings, but you have to have the right projects to use those resources on, and it's not every single card. And then the money, the credits, that's very universal, so go ahead and go wild on that. I'm going to have a quick conversation about victory point cards in the game. And so you start kind of realizing what's good and what isn't good. One thing I always want you to do when you have any of these project cards with just some basic victory point conditions on them, try to figure out, is this cost effective? Is this a good use of my resources? So first and foremost, since you have to buy every card, kind of factor in that you have to pay 3 credits just for the card. In addition to that, then it's going to have a cost as well. So as an example, these breathing filters will have a cost of 14. The dust seals really have a cost of 5. And then the space station itself has a cost of 13 to play. So factor that in when you're looking at victory point totals. The reason why I put the milestones on the top is that you can kind of make a comparison. So look at the milestones, and I want to bring this home of why the milestones are so good. For 8 credits, you can get 5 victory points. Obviously, you have to satisfy the conditions, but it's definitely worth the cost. Now, if I look at the breathing filters, this is going to cost essentially 14 to get 2 victory points. So if you just look at that sort of cost comparison, always be on the lookout to satisfy those milestones. I know I've mentioned that time and time again, but be really critical of that. Another example is this dust seal card. Yeah, it's super easy to play. It's 5. You get 1 point for it, but it also has a restriction on it as well. So just be cognizant and always try to compare these project cards against the milestones and then also against the standard projects. Terraforming Mars has a host of strategies. There is no way in a short video I could go over all of the advanced strategies, all of the different combinations that you could play. So the intent of this video was just to give you some basic tips and tactics to form sort of a core strategy. And kind of what I recommend, and I do this every time I play this game, I try something new. I try something different. I try a different way of looking at things. I try different strategies and card combinations. That's what really makes the game fun. For me, it's not necessarily about winning, but trying out different strategies and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. Kind of what I gave you today are the nuts and bolts of what to do to kind of get a nice average score. And if you're playing with inexperienced people, you're definitely going to be leading the pack by doing these tips and these tricks. I hope you've enjoyed watching today, and as always, have fun gaming.